Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Just Interesting podcast. With me, your host, Alex, and joining me today, as always, it is Martin and Robin. How are you both?
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, fellas, to a new season of the podcast. It is season 7, is what we're saying. We're going with that one. I'm pretty sure the last season was 4, but we're saying season 7 now.
It sounds about right, doesn't it? 7 sounds good.
Yeah.
It might be 6.
I'm pretty sure we were. Yeah, we're going with 7. Yeah.
Now, for those of you who have been following us for a while, this season's going to be a little bit different. You may have noticed, you may have seen this on the channel already, but we're going to try something different this season. For those of you who are unaware, we are going to be splitting up the podcast. So whereas in previous seasons, we would talk about things that we've learned this week, a main topic of the week, your comments, our favorite comments of the last week, and the quiz, we are now doing the quiz and what we learned this week as a separate live stream over on YouTube. So if you want to see us live doing the quiz, then make sure you're following us at Just Interesting on YouTube. But for you podcast listeners, we will be talking exclusively about a main topic. And the main topic this week is cryptids. And we're each going to be discussing, I don't know, one of our favorite cryptids, one of the more interesting cryptids. But I think having briefly mentioned it with the two of you, I think we can say it's some of the more obscure cryptids. We're not going to be talking about Bigfoot. We're not going to be talking about the Loch Ness Monster. So stay tuned for some of those. But one thing we are going to be doing before we jump into the main topic is a riddle. Because that was a smash hit last season, despite what many people were saying. We loved it. We loved it.
Very
Yeah,
quality,
I'm so glad we carried that over.
So, fellas, would you like a riddle before we get crack on to the main meat of the podcast?
Yes, riddle me this.
I'd love a riddle. I'm looking forward to finding out what kind of riddle this one is, Alex.
It is. It's a rhyming riddle because I found those are always a bit more fun. So, okay, what am I? It cannot be seen, it cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt, lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. Comes first, follows after, ends life, kills laughter. So I say it again?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
What
Very well
am
said.
I? It cannot be seen, it cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. Lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. Comes first, follows after, ends life, kills laughter. What am I?
See, I have an idea up to a point, and then those last lines completely threw me off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Under hills.
Well, if you think you know it at
Okay.
home, then wait till the end of the episode, and I shall reveal the answer to you. But before we jump onto the main topic, I did want to just say a massive thank you to everyone who's continued to support the podcast over on our Patreon channel and by becoming members on our YouTube channel. And specifically, I believe Robin has some people that he'd like to mention with his dulcet tones.
Oh, why, thank you, Alex. I would especially like to thank James, Rashad Najar, Caleb Wilkerson, Kurt Jones, John Baker, Janie, Henny Ruffle, The Super Show Podcast, Nicholas Dill, Emmett Tapia, Ahmad, Peaswad, Josh Tromatek, a filthy casual, Simon Workman, and Captain Wonky, who are special people deserving of extra special thanks because of all our wonderful Patreon supporters and YouTube members. They are the top tier. So thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart, and Alex's and Martin's, for all of the things that you've done for us all these years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We greatly appreciate it. And we're going to be recording another Patreon exclusive episode after this one. We haven't decided on the topic yet, but there are over 100 episodes in the back catalogue. If you did want to support us on Patreon, obviously no pressure. Either way, we are quite happy for you to stick around here. But that's always an option. If you just can't get enough of us, that's there for you over on our Patreon, as well as access to our Discord and and just the thrill and joy of knowing that you're supporting our channel. So thank you all so much. Fellas, did you have any favorite comments from the past week that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, quite a few, actually. I mean, there's so many good ones, particularly on a snippet, a YouTube short that went up from an episode where Martin tried to persuade you and me, Alex, about the shape of the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What shape is the moon, Martin? What shape is this? What shape of
The
the moon?
moon is slightly lemon-shaped. Everyone knows this. It's a fact. Okay.
Well, some people disagree with you, I'm afraid. So not everyone knows this because Yankee Watchdog 6493 commented saying, "This guy's a bozo. The moon has a small amount of gravity, which will make it a sphere."
Yeah.
Conclusive proof, Martin. Conclusive proof.
I think we can all agree that it is slightly lemony.
I do feel partially to blame for this because in the YouTube short in question, I used an image of the moon shaped exactly like a lemon, which I do feel is misrepresentative of maybe what you were saying, which is that it just has a slight lemon edge to it. It's like it's like one of those squat lemons you find. Not like when you imagine a lemon, but like you get those ones that are basically spheres, but they're just a little bit
just a little bit lemony. Yeah. I can't remember. I mean, it was a little while ago now, and I can't remember the exact science behind it.
It was to do with the Earth's gravitational pull affecting the moon,
and the poles,
and from when it first formed, and it was lots of like hot magma,
molten. That's right. That's right. Yeah.
It makes sense when you explain it, but some people just can't wait for the explanation, Martin. I guess they're just impatient. However, to temper that slightly rude comment about you, I do have a more wholesome one from Michael Air 909, who commented on a podcast that we made a couple of weeks ago about studies into how people change when they become parents, both biologically and behaviorally. And Michael commented saying, "I wonder if Martin puts this podcast on for his child when he can't be home. Also, when they grow up," a little bit. He says, "when they grow up, they'll have hundreds of hours of content to watch showing what their dad was up to when they were still in nappies."
I know, that's what I wonder about. That's
just telling people, just telling the world about the truth of the lemon moon, the fact that the moon's shaped like a lemon.
Well, Robin, people were also very enthusiastic about your video about Hitler and the Spear of Destiny. And there were various comments saying, "Make more of this, fantastic." But the one I wanted to bring up was from Brighton Block, who says, "My wife calls my Willy the Spear of Disappointment." No belief at all. So, I thought that was a good comment.
That's great.
That's a great comment. I hope she actually does that.
Hopefully things get better for you, Brighton Block.
Well, speaking of new things going up on the channel, the one that I wanted to mention was from the current series that's going out as we're recording this on the channel of Robin Eats Things on our YouTube Shorts playlists. And Vivian Circle says, "This easily has become one of my favorite things to pop up in my feed. Keep at it. And of course, thank you for your sacrifice." And that was for you eating some of Dracula's dream fudge. I love your reactions to things, Robin, when you're eating. You eating Vegemite.
Thank you.
You eating overly
that was
sweet
the worst
fudge.
Thing.
It's just so...
It's the extremes.
I genuinely think that could be a very popular side channel that you do where it's just Robin tries foods.
Robin eats things.
And reacts. Like, oh, that's sweet.
Like a middle-aged man. But I put my teeth back in. This is chewy.
I do think we should give it a rating.
Oh, right. Okay, like a review.
A star
at the
system.
end.
Review at the end. We need to expand on the
5 out of 5 sugar cubes for that one. Yeah. No, that was the fudge was very sweet, sickly sweet, but it was nice. I don't mind sweet things.
What flavor was it again?
It was strawberry and chocolate.
Oh yeah, strawberry. That kind
it was a weird combination.
Sweet strawberry, like it's not like probably not like a real strawberry flavor.
I doubt it was made with real strawberries. It definitely didn't taste like it. Vegemite, though, hands down, probably up there as the top contender for the worst thing I've ever eaten.
Wow. Okay.
Genuinely. It's
So you've
awful. And I don't know how a whole nation proudly says, hey, Vegemite. No.
I've
You've
never
just
had
basically
it.
declared war on Australia, Robin.
Yeah.
Is it similar to Marmite?
It is, but it's genuinely, it's like
Worse.
someone tried Marmite and thought, how can I make this worse?
Right.
It's worse than Marmite, and I'd hate Marmite.
I remember. So I traveled around Europe like in my year off between school and going off to uni.
You're a gap year.
In my gap year. And I did a stint like on this tour company, but it was like, so I wanted to go around Europe, but generally over here, like the gap year people go to like South America or to Asia. So like Australians come and do the Europe tour, very popular.
Right, yeah.
So on
Yes,
the tour that I did, there were so many Australians, and it was like a 2-month thing we were doing, and we were staying in hostels as we were going. And one hostel towards the end of the trip had Vegemite, and it was the first time any of them had seen it in months, and they went bananas for it. Like I've never seen anyone run to the buffet table for Vegemite as well.
Just a taste of home. It doesn't have to be good
for Vegemite. Yeah.
But it's not good. That's crazy. It's an abusive relationship. It's conditioning. It's like arsenic. Like, oh, I quite like the taste of arsenic now that I've had a spoonful of it every day for the last 30 years.
I don't think that's a fair comparison. Comparing Vegemite
poison
to arsenic. Yeah.
There's probably some
I haven't had it,
defamation there. I don't actually think that. Just for clarification, for legal purposes. Yeah. Don't have it. I wouldn't recommend it.
No.
Even if you like Marmite, it's not worth it. I don't understand how you're supposed to eat it.
Do they do it on toast? Is it like an on toast kind of thing?
Yeah, on toast. Although someone did comment on that. I noticed saying I was overdoing it. I had too much on my toast,
really?
Which, I mean, but then my question would be, why? Why is this a spread that's provided at breakfast if one little, bite-sized capsule of it is too much? That's wrong.
Oh, a little goes a long way, I guess, There's lots of things like that. You wouldn't cover something in hot sauce. You just put a little dab on,
True, but that wouldn't normally be provided in those little spreadable pots,
Oh, right. It makes you think it's one serving per thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Yeah.
That's my defense, anyway, for my mistakes.
Yeah.
I didn't even put a whole pot on that slice of the bread. It was just a third of it.
Fair enough. Well, fellas,
all this is going to be revealed in the detailed documentary I made about my travels to Australia, which may never happen. The documentary, obviously.
Well, fellas, we should probably start talking about the main topic and probably stop talking about Vegemite. Yes. Mm-hmm. However, I do believe that one of us does have a cryptid they want to talk about from Australia. So maybe Vegemite will come back into this discussion. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
So, cryptozoology. What is it for anyone who doesn't understand? Cryptozoology is an intriguing field of study that delves into the investigation of hidden or undiscovered animals, known as cryptids. It blends elements of zoology, folklore, scientific inquiry, aiming to uncover and understand creatures that exist outside the realm of mainstream scientific recognition. Cryptids are often elusive, with their existence based on anecdotal evidence, eyewitness testimonies, and occasional physical traces. While cryptozoology is often met with skepticism from the scientific community, it continues to captivate the imagination of enthusiasts and researchers alike. So let's just open up the discussion and see which ones we've gone for. Obviously, everyone thinks of Bigfoot, everyone thinks of the Loch Ness Monster, but there is so much to cryptozoology, so many ones out there that we've talked about before. There are different plesiosaurs, like the Loch Ness Monster, but similar. There's the Thunderbird in Native American folklore. There's plenty out there. Basically 100 varieties of different Bigfoots. Some we may be talking about today. But yeah, let's talk about some of them. Martin, do you want to go first? Because we're talking about Australia. So
we're talking about Australia, and in fact, I mean, I don't want to shit on your parade here, but this one is fairly similar to Bigfoot, and
Okay.
and why I wanted to bring it up, and why partly I wanted to bring it up was because it predates Bigfoot.
Oh.
By there aren't specific dates for it, but it dates back to like the original settlers, the Aborigines from Australia.
Right.
And I'm just interested that when people think of these mysterious creatures and especially with the Aborigine folklore, it's interesting that the same types and the same descriptions of these mysterious creatures come up again and again, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
The fact that if in folklore, it's so often similar types of creatures that are described as being kind of the Bigfoot, the Yeti, the Loch Ness monster. These types of creatures appear again and again. And is there any truth to it? So anyway, this creature from Australia is called the Yowie. So Yowie, Yowie. And it's said to inhabit the Australian wilderness. So similar in description to Bigfoot, the Sasquatch of the Americas. It's a large ape-like creature standing between 6 to 10 feet tall, muscular and covered in hair. Common features include, as I say, being really, really heavily built, has a prominent brow ridge above its eye line, and then glowing or red eyes.
Ooh,
So
creepy.
That's interesting. And there are a few different types of hair or fur that it supposedly has. Typically it's brown or dark, although some people have said it's more reddish color as well. And so the legend traces back to the indigenous people of Australia. And the Yowie has been reported being seen in Australia for hundreds of years, for centuries. So it predates Bigfoot in North America by quite some time. So similarly to Bigfoot, it's a kind of elusive creature. It avoids human contact. There's obviously that famous video of Bigfoot where he's kind of walking away from the camera.
Yeah, over his shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's found in remote forests and wilderness areas. But actually, it's been sighted near populated towns as well. As you'd expect from something like this, there's limited concrete evidence, but apparently some people have said to have discovered footprints of the Yowie and hair samples, and also there are some like blurry photographs out there about what it could be, but there's nothing concrete, which is a fairly common theme when it comes to cryptozoology.
I think if it wasn't, then they wouldn't be cryptids. They would just be animals. They would
exactly.
Yeah.
So some people speculate that it could be a prehistoric ape or a close relative of the Gigantopithecus,
Right.
an extinct ape that lived in Asia.
Interesting.
That's not Australia.
It's not Australia, but perhaps something like that could have also lived out in Australia, as the theory goes. So onto some supposed sightings of this of the Yowie. So in the 19th century, in particular in the 1850s, there are accounts in the Australian Town and Country Journal that said that there were sightings of indigenous apes. With this particular journal asking its readers, who has not heard from the earliest settlement of the colony the black speaking of some unearthly animal or inhuman creature, namely the Yahoo devil or hairy man of the wood.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah. And then it appears in cycles, as these things often do. So 6 years later, there was, it came up again in local print and newspapers. And a naturalist, a guy named Henry James McCooey, claimed to have again seen this indigenous ape on the south coast of New South Wales. And he said that it was standing nearly 5 feet tall, so a little bit shorter than other sightings. And then it had a dirty red or snuff coloured around the throat and the stomach, and then dark hair elsewhere. And it said his eyes were covered over with like fur, but it could just see these beady eyes through this fur.
Ooh.
And Mukui was scared, but did offer £40 for anyone who was to capture the ape.
I thought you were going to say he offered the thing £40. It's like, please, just take my money. That would be great. If you ever come across Bigfoot, just open your wallet and give him some money.
Offer him some money. Come on, mate. Let's go to the museum. I'll give you some cash. Get some donuts on the way. So more recently, in 2010, a man said that he saw an animal described as a juvenile covered in hair with long arms that almost touched the ground in his garage. And he was told by a friend who knew this Aborigine story that it could be the Yowie. So, again, not exactly concrete evidence, but a potential sighting.
It was in his garage. How did he not take a picture?
You'd think he might do, right? And then there's
I'd love that if that was just a burglar and he was like, "What is this animal that I've got in my garage?" It's just a small person had broken into a small, very hairy person had broken into his garage.
Yeah, youth.
I've caught the Yowie.
And then actually most of the other sightings have come in the New South Wales area. The majority has been about 20 sightings there over the years of people hearing all kinds of things. So a hairy ape-like animal making screaming noises at night.
Okay.
So that was one. That was in 1977. And then in 1994, there was a claim of seeing the Yowie in the Brindabella Ranges. In 1996, a couple were on holiday and claimed to have seen the Yowie near the coast in New South Wales, a shaggy creature walking upright, standing at a height of at least 2.1 meters tall, with really long arms and no neck. And then in 2000, a bushwalker described seeing an unknown bipedal beast in the Brindabella Mountains again. 2011, again in the Blue Mountains in Springwood, west of Sydney. The witness had supposedly filmed and taken photographs of its footprints.
Interesting.
And then there's been a few more recently as well. So 2012, an American television crew claimed it recorded audio of a Yowie in the New South Wales, Queensland border. So plenty of sightings, but nothing concrete. And that always makes me think either people are seeing something and misidentifying it, and then you got to think, okay, what could that be? Could it be an ape? Could it be just a creature that's within the area that people are misidentifying?
A man in a costume.
Or potentially. Or are these things cyclical? It tends to be that you find that we've had a recent spurt from 2010 to 2013. There's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7, right? Sightings.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the others were then in the 90s and then in the 70s, right? And then before that, the 19th century. So is it that people are getting interest? The story comes up again, they see it in the newspaper, gets a bit of a headline, and then it's, I've seen one too. And so there's actually
it's so interesting how
kind of hysteria almost.
Hysteria, Or people wanting to be the center of attention.
Yeah. It's so interesting how these stories are so universal as well. Like particularly the idea of a Bigfoot is found all across the world. I mean, spoiler alert, the one I'm going to talk about is a kind of similar type of animal. Not a Bigfoot, actually kind of a small foot. But
a small Bigfoot.
Yeah. But it's interesting how this story just is like you can find it all across the world. Yeah. I wonder.
And so there must be some truth to it. An unidentified creature that might be Bigfoot, might be a Yowie, or probably is something else, right? People do see something out of the ordinary. Maybe it's just like me, I just haven't got my glasses on. I think I've seen something.
Especially if you're in the wilderness and in a forested area, you can see something and not really see it.
Yeah.
It's so easy to misinterpret what you're seeing, even if you've got good eyesight. I mean,
100%.
This is pretty compelling. I find it's very giant koala.
Giant koala just walking on two legs. Can they do that?
I hate to be Mr. Ultimate Skeptic, but the description of the Yowie, more so than any other description of Bigfoot that I've encountered, sounds a lot like a hairy homeless man. Just
or
just a guy on the beach, or just an ape. Yeah. Yeah, if he's got a big enough beard and long enough hair, you can kind of misinterpret where the shoulders are.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah.
Is my expert opinion on, on this thing. I'm just saying, there's surprisingly, I never heard of it. So surprisingly, a lot of evidence to suggest there is something out there, but it sounds like the kind of thing people might easily be misinterpreting as something else.
Well, there's plenty of sightings, enough to suggest that people aren't making it up. I don't think at least not everyone's making it up.
And also, let's not forget,
has been seen.
These are Australians. They live in the land of animals that want to kill them. They are very aware of what's in their backyard, I think. So if something that they've seen scares them, now that's something I think we should pay attention to, because that must be pretty scary. It's scaring Australians.
Very true, very true.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Australian Bigfoot.
Cool. I do have one more that I can bring up very quickly.
Okay.
Just because there's not too much to say about it. But just for people watching at home, I'm sure we'll get up on the screen now, but I was looking through different cryptids, and this one made me laugh. So if anyone's listening to this and isn't able to see, just Google the Loveland frog, okay? And the artist's interpretation of the Loveland frog is basically a frog standing on 2 feet. And it's just the best picture. So it's just hilarious. So this is a humanoid frog.
The artist has really captured it looking so suspicious, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. So the side eye is just amazing on this artist's interpretation.
It's that frozen in the headlights moment of,
I've been caught.
if I don't move, they don't see me.
I love that it's just by a barrier. It looks like it's just by a barrier on the side of the freeway.
I know, what's that about? It's like all it's doing is crossing the road at night
with a spotlight on it. It's great. But this one comes from Ohio folklore, dating back only to the 70s.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think it actually dates back. The folklore dates back further than that, but the first official sighting was in the 70s. A police officer, no less, reported that he had seen the animal had a consistent description of what this frog looks like, right? And then there's been some more sightings more recently. I think the most recent one was in 2016, where there was like a report that someone, I think they'd said that they'd shot and killed the creature. But anyway, there's not too much evidence for this actually existing. But
I shot and killed it, but by the time I got to it, it had already turned back into my neighbor's dog.
Yeah, I think it's just a fun thing. But it's interesting that something like a bipedal frog has become the folklore. Like, where does that come from? Like, I get Bigfoot. I get it. I absolutely get the yowie, because it's like you can see an ape and it's kind of scary, or it could be a human, as you say, maybe like a disheveled homeless person. But a frog on 2 legs that's 4 foot tall. I mean, where are you getting this from?
They're getting it from the Muppets. Someone's been watching the Muppets too much.
They saw Kermit.
I saw Kermit on the freeway. He looked suspicious.
But interesting, the policeman was the one who...
that is, a surprising figure of authority to say that, yeah. I wonder, maybe if it was 1970s, maybe that is the inevitable product of the chemicals they've been pouring into the water that turns the freaking frogs into bipedal monsters.
Yeah, I mean, saying that though, maybe this was the time of like Mothman and everything. They were like, we can't rule anything out, Frogs on the freeway, 4 foot frogs. There are moths flying around.
I mean, what would you do if you're driving along and you see a frog walking on its hind legs down the road? Do you stop, or do you just keep going? Because if it's walking on its hind legs, what else is it capable of doing?
I know. I think actually, looking at the bloke who shot the frog, when he recounted the story, he was like, it was just a massive iguana. But the legend of him actually shooting the frogman kind of persisted and existed before this sighting as well.
Yeah.
So perhaps the original frogman was actually an iguana, but
That makes a lot of sense.
I prefer to go with this artist rendition of what it looks like. 'Cause it's just so much better.
I mean, I like the idea of a frog walking around on its hind legs. Can't be that harmful, right? So it's a frog.
Frogs.
Maybe one of those
Crazy frogs.
poisonous frogs. Yeah. Oh, that's definitely harmful.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing those, Martin. They were great.
No problem.
They were great, yeah.
Fingers crossed one day we'll track down, God willing, what was that one called? The frog?
Loveland?
The Loveland frog.
Loveland frog.
If you're listening to this, Loveland frog, we're coming after you and we're going to find you.
Please contact us on Twitter at JInterestingYT, Loveland Frog. We would love to have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Might be my new handle now. Loveland Frog. Yeah, that's quite good.
Robin, would you care to share what you've brought this week?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's a bit of a longer story than Martin's frog, so hope you're settled in comfortably. But we're sticking with the Americas.
Okay.
This one's South America. Argentina, in fact. Well, Patagonia, specifically. Have you ever heard of the Yemish?
It does ring a bell.
IEMISCH. Well, maybe you know the story already, but for the sake of our listeners who may not know the story, I shall tell it in its full. Now, the Yemish was first mentioned in 1898 in a scientific paper by Argentine paleontologist, anthropologist, and zoologist Florentino Ameghino, who actually in this paper was detailing his discovery of the fossilized remains of the real Mylodon, which is a prehistoric giant sloth that existed in Patagonia.
Yeah.
That's a real thing. And so this is a genuine scientific paper that has never been discredited because it's a real find. And in it, as well as describing the bones of the Mylodon, he mentions native stories of a mysterious four-legged massive beast of a terrible and invulnerable appearance whose body cannot be penetrated by missiles or burning branches.
Okay.
And they call it the Yemish, or the water tiger. And mentioning its name terrorizes the locals. And when interrogated and asked for details, they become grim, drop their heads, turn mute, or evade answering.
Ooh.
So, yeah, according to Florentino Ameghino, this is a pretty substantial myth in the local community. And he also had a letter from his brother, Carlos, who was also an explorer in the area, who first drew his attention to the Yemish. And I'll read out the letter, not quite in full, because it's a long letter, but the interesting bits to you, if you are interested.
I'm very interested.
And this is what Carlos Ameghino said. At last, I have managed to get from the Tehuelche Indians some precise data on the famous Yemish, which is not a myth or a ghost, as we have thought, but something that truly exists. I have seen an Indian who had a piece of Yemish hide that has tiny bones embedded in it, which I am sending to you, similar to the fossilized ones we found in Mylodon skeletons. And another Tehuelche Indian has told me how, while going by the Sengue River in Santa Cruz, they met a Yemish on the road that closed his way, and he fought with it, killing it by hitting it with his bolas. According to the Indians, it is amphibious and walks on land with the same ease as it swims in the water. It is now confined to central Patagonia in caves and protected areas along the shores of Colhuay. But according to tradition, they used to extend in other times further to the north and to the south. According to what old Indians can remember, it lived in all the lakes of the oriental foothills of the Andes, up to the very Strait of Magellan. Around 1848, a Yemish that was coming down to the Santa Cruz River from the Andean lakes landed on the northern shore of the river close to Pavon Island. The terrified Indians ran inland, and since then, as a remembrance of this unexpected apparition, this abandoned place still today bears the name of Yemish Aiken, which is the place of the Yemish. It is a creature of the night, and they say that it is so strong that it grabs onto horses with its claws, dragging them into the water. It has a short head, large fangs, and its external ears are lacking or rudimentary, short and flat feet, with 3 fingers on its front paws and 4 on the rear ones, joined by a natatory membrane with formidable claws. The tail is long, depressed, and prehensile, The body is covered with short, hard, and rigid hairs of a uniform brownish color. The size is said to be larger than that of a puma, but with shorter legs and a much thicker body. Which, as an aside, it's not a very useful description to me. It's like a puma, but not. Anyway. So that was the letter from his brother Carlos. And then in 1870, a British explorer called George Howarth Musters went to Patagonia. And in his memoirs, he recounted that in a certain place called Senguel on the Sengue River, which is the same place that Florentino mentions in his paper on the Mylodons, the Indians warned him not to go into the river because of ferocious water tigers, which are larger than pumas and walk on all fours, that lived in the river and will drag anything crossing it into the deep of the waters. So apart from these three counts from the 19th century, two of them from brothers, there weren't any other stories until the 1950s, when cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans investigated and gathered more descriptions of the Yemish. Now, just so people know, Bernard Heuvelmans, I think I'm saying his name correctly, is often called the father of cryptozoology. He's the fellow who kind of birthed the science, the study of these mythical creatures that people haven't officially found yet. And I think he even coined the term cryptozoology. So he investigated it in the 1950s, and he gathered more descriptions of the Yemish and summarized it as being a mixture of a jaguar and an otter. Some people claiming it was as big as an ox and as quick as it is on land as on water, which tallies with Florentino's description, and possessing a soul-wrenching scream.
Ooh.
The only
common theme, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's the consistency across these stories is what interests me. The only other scientific collection of stories is from the 1910s and early 1920s, when an Argentinian anthropologist at the La Plata Natural History Museum and the University of Buenos Aires, Robert Lehmann-Nietzsche, who's from Germany, and his colleague Santiago Roth were gathering. They were anthropologists, and they were just gathering native myths and stories, and they included some Yemish tales. And they also concluded, based on their descriptions, that it must be some kind of unknown otter, based on the descriptions. But
an unknown otter that can drag horses to their doom.
Yeah, with a soul-wrenching scream. Yeah, terrifying. However, upon peer review, Nietzsche and Roth's studies were widely disregarded because other anthropologists and zoologists and paleontologists who spent time in Argentina and claimed to have spent equal amounts of time with Patagonian natives as these two had, said they'd never heard of the Yemish. So how did these two hear of the Yemish? The Yemish is not real because we've never heard of it. And George Gaylord Simpson, who's a paleontologist and visited Patagonia several times to research in the 1930s, pointed out that linguistically, the word Yemish isn't associated with any language spoken in Argentina or Patagonia.
Oh,
right. Okay.
Yeah. And
he made it up.
And I quote, "Let it be said at once that the Indian tales of the Yemish, if not invented to amuse the stupid white men, were simply myths with no foundation in reality."
I see.
I do like the thought that it was just a widespread prank that they were playing on these tourists, visitors that had come to town.
But a really consistent one.
A very consistent one, yeah.
They did well.
And there are no other, they call it Ionikenk is the culture of the people in Patagonia. And there are no other myths known that tally with the stories of the Yemish. As in pre-existing foundation stories about gods or other mythical creatures. The Yemish doesn't feature in those. So the Yemish seems to be peculiar to the 1848 to 1950 period of study.
So it sounds like it could have been a prank. Could have been just a social experiment.
They thought they were the anthropologists, but actually it was the natives studying them. Let's see, will they believe anything we tell them? Yeah, that's the thing, Martin. It's 100 years of white men recording these stories, and there is a consistency to them, which I find puzzling. Mostly with cryptids, I feel like you with the Yowie, there was a consistency there, which was unusual. But I feel like a lot of the time, there's too much conflicting data for cryptids to really be plausible.
Yeah. I mean, some of the descriptions are very different. Yeah.
I mean,
you mean of the Amish?
In a lot of them, isn't it? I mean, you read any description, it's the like with the Yowie, one of them said at 1.5 meters tall, another said 2.2. That's quite a big difference in terms of height. Red eyes or not red eyes, or hair over the eyes or not. There are quite a few differences. But
that's a good point.
Remarkably consistent.
I think one thing that you mentioned there, though, is there is a little cryptid that you can take away from the story. The Mylodon. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a statue of it, or maybe a slightly different one. I think it's
in the Natural History Museum.
That is a Mylodon, is it? I
think it is. Yeah.
I remember going and visiting that and seeing that and just being absolutely like, it was like finding out unicorns exist type thing. It's like, what? This thing existed? No way. And everyone was
astonishing, isn't it?
Everyone was looking at like the dinosaur exhibit and stuff, and I was just like, what? Yeah. This thing existed?
It's like Snorlax in real life. I kind of crazy. Every time I see that, I'm like, I want that as a pet, please. I bet they're friendly.
I love them. There are animals that are stranger than fiction, aren't there? I was looking a few days ago actually at some of the the deep sea creatures that have been found. In particular the one with the light, the light on its head.
The anglerfish.
Oh, the anglerfish.
Yeah. I mean, those are just absolutely terrifying. You don't look like they should be real.
Yeah, definitely.
And the giant squid, which is now pretty much, I think, considered to be a real thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
All those legendary stories from sailors, but now they've pretty much found it in the deep, deep ocean. It exists.
I mean, we've discussed that in a previous episode of like sea. Well, I can't remember what we called it. Ocean myths explained. And
yes, that's right. Yeah.
Basically, back in the day, people would talk about massive sea serpents. You've got oarfish. That look up oarfish. They are just as the sailors described back in the day, massive sea serpents. It's easy to see why people believed in things like the Kraken because of like giant squids washing up on shore. These are things that did kind of exist. Really, we just didn't know the name of them.
Just because they used the name that we consider to be mythical, it's just a name for the same thing.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it's funny. That reminds me. Sorry.
Oh no, please.
This is a complete tangent, so feel free to edit this out.
Take me on a journey, Robin.
It reminds me of one of those YouTube reviews of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which is one of those hating on it, bashing it, and criticizing every single plot point. And there's in the middle of the film, people might not remember this, but there's a bit where Indiana Jones goes down with Shia LaBeouf into a tomb, and they find the titular crystal skull, and it's with some bodies of some Spanish conquistadors that were exploring the jungle in the 1500s or whatever it was. And Indiana Jones just starts saying, what if the conquistadors went into the jungle, found this lost city, found the crystal skull, left it, brought it with them, blah, 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 blah. And the YouTube critic said, what the hell is this? This is terrible plotting, terrible writing. He's just making stuff up on the spot. We're meant to believe that that's what happened. And as someone who studied history and a bit of archaeology at school and who's still got a passion for history and archaeology and reads archaeological journals, I was just like, yes, that's exactly what archaeologists do.
They theorize
all the time. That's what paleontologists do as well. They find a fossil, a fragment, and they're like, this belonged to a 20-foot monster. It's all extrapolation from the evidence we've got. And of course, this is Indiana Jones is set in the 1950s, so even more inclined to be like, I've found this one thing and I'm going to completely make up a story that explains how it got here. And then we investigate and test the story. It's not quite the scientific method, but it's so that reminded me of your comment about if the giant squid washes up on the beach, then people are going to look at it and be like, oh, that looks big enough to take down ships. And then they start inventing these stories about these creatures that can do incredible things, a bit like the Yemish. Oh, it's got really sharp claws. It could take down a horse and stuff like that. And don't go into the river or the Yemish will get you. That's just practical sense,
Yeah.
Whether or not it can actually get you, it might not be strong enough, but there's a nasty thing in the water, don't go in there. It's just common sense,
Whereas what that YouTube critic review is saying people should do is see a massive washed up like monster on the shore and say, hey, that's big enough to take down a ship. But I guess we'll never know for sure, and just walk on.
Just
walk on by.
Exactly. Yeah. Until we know it's definitely dangerous, let's approach it and get up close. Yeah.
Excellent. Well,
sorry to interrupt, Alex.
Well, Robin, I'm sorry to stop you from looking at YouTube reviews of Indiana Jones, which is, I know, one of your favorite pastimes.
It is, yeah.
Shall I talk to you guys about my cryptid that I brought this week?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Well, similar to Martin, this is a kind of Bigfoot-esque creature. But as I said, it's more of a smallfoot, really. And the one that I wanted to talk about is the orang pendek. The orang pendek is a cryptid reported to inhabit the dense forests of Sumatra, Indonesia. It is described as a small, bipedal, ape-like creature. And this name, orang pendek, translates to short person in Indonesian, referring to its
that's a great name.
referring to its bipedal ape-like appearance. Just short person, yeah. The creature has allegedly been seen and documented for at least 100 years by forest tribes, local villagers, Dutch colonists, and Western scientists and travelers. Consensus among witnesses is that the entity is a ground-dwelling, bipedal primate covered in short fur, standing between 80 and 150 centimeters.
That is short, actually.
30 and 60 inches tall, and possessing human-like facial features. And whilst
cute.
It does sound a little bit cute, yeah. While scientific consensus remains elusive, there have been several compelling pieces of evidence suggesting the potential existence of the orang pendek. One prominent aspect of the research is the consistent accounts from eyewitnesses, including local villagers and researchers. These individuals have reported sightings of the creature for decades, providing detailed descriptions and similar observations of its physical characteristics and behavior.
Okay.
And this is kind of similar to your one, I think, Robin. There's a lot of very consistent retellings of, this description of the orang pendek.
That's what we like to hear.
And so I just want to talk about the Dutch settlers in the early 20th century. They provided Westerners with the first modern introduction to this creature, the orang pendek, from Sumatra. One account in particular, this is one that's widely reported from Mr. Van Heerwaarden, who described an encounter he had while surveying land in 1923. I discovered a dark and hairy creature on a branch. The sedapa was also hairy on the front and its body. The colour there was a little lighter than on its back. The very dark hair on its head fell to just below the shoulder blades, or even almost to the waist. Had it been standing, its arms would have reached to a little above its knees. They were therefore long, but its legs seemed to me rather short. I did not see its feet, but I did see some toes which were shaped in a very normal manner. There was nothing repulsive or ugly about its face, nor was it at all ape-like. So
Interesting.
I think that's
Not
an
at
interesting
all,
description.
okay.
Not
Yeah.
at all
That's kind of
ape-like.
The opposite, yeah.
So he's saying it was just a hairy small dude. Is what he was basically saying, with disproportionately small legs, is what I think he was saying.
Yeah.
But it was a hairy creature on a branch still. But I think in terms of how it was standing and the toes, he seemed to see his toes and said they would just describe them as very normal, which I don't know what that means, but
normal
in this
toes.
context.
Yeah. But aren't we apes? We're like primates, right? Aren't we? I thought we were.
We are primates,
not.
Robin, yeah.
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 So why can't this thing have human-like features, but also still be an ape?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It probably is an ape if it does exist.
Busted. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
But you wouldn't. I think I feel like maybe there's an issue in translation, but I guess you wouldn't describe a human as ape-like. I think he's probably saying like, well, that doesn't look like a chimpanzee.
Right. Yes.
I think that's what he says.
Mm.
That's more
Right,
human,
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes sense.
I get that. Yeah.
Also, in addition to this, footprint discoveries have also been contributed to the body of evidence. In 2001, British researcher Adam Davies and primatologist Dr. Ian Redmond discovered and cast a set of footprints in the Sumatran jungle, which were attributed to this creature, the orang pendek. These footprints displayed a distinct human-like shape with an opposable big toe, similar to primates, but not commonly found in other animals. They also discovered hair samples, which are believed to belong to this animal. One instance involves a lady called Debbie Martyr, an explorer and researcher who collected hair samples in 2001 that were later analysed by a British laboratory. The results revealed the presence of an unknown primate species distinct from known animals in the region. So that's...
Oh, wow. That's big.
That's pretty compelling.
Yeah, that's good evidence.
Also, I just want to quote some leading experts in this kind of area. They've expressed their thoughts and opinions on the orang pendek, providing intriguing insights. So Dr. Bayrut Galdakas, a renowned primatologist and expert on orangutans, stated, "I think it is very possible that the orang pendek exists. Too many people have seen it for there to be nothing." Dr. Russell Mittermeier, primatologist and president of Conservation International, remarked, "I am open to the possibility that the orang pendek exists. It would not be surprising to find that there are undiscovered primate species in the forests of Sumatra." And Adam Davies, not Alan Davies, Adam Davies, who's a cryptozoologist and researcher, said, "The orang pendek is an enigmatic creature that has fascinated me for years. The eyewitness accounts and physical evidence point to something real, and further investigation is warranted." So
that is interesting, though. They're saying that it wouldn't surprise them if there was undiscovered primate creatures. That seems quite crazy to me.
I think that's as much of an endorsement as you can get from a serious kind of expert in this field, isn't it? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if it exists. Is pretty much saying like, yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
But I just want to go back a little bit and talk about this creature in terms of the folklore of the local tribes that existed in the area. So the Suku Anak Dalam, or as it's translated, children of the inner forest, also known as the Orang Kubu, are groups of nomadic people who have traditionally lived throughout the lowland forests of Jambi and South Sumatra. And according to their legends, the orang pendek has been part of their world and a co-inhabitant of the forests for centuries. And also, there's a tribe called the Orang Rimba, which speak of a creature known as the Hantu pendek, whose descriptions closely matches that of the orang pendek. However, Hantu pendek is thought of more as a supernatural entity or a demon rather than an animal, with the name translating to short ghost.
Interesting.
Okay, well, that's spooky.
Yeah.
And according to them, the Hantu pendek travelled in groups of 5 or 6, subsisting on wild yams and hunting animals with small axes. And accounts of the creature claim that it ambushes unfortunate members of the tribe, like the hunters, travelling alone in the forest. Along the Markakul River on the western edge of this place, people recount a legend of how their ancestors outsmarted these cunning yet dim-witted creatures during a hunting trip, and the story is often used to boast of their intellect and reason. So there's war tales involving these small ghosts. But imagine how scary that would be if you encounter a group of like 6 tiny ape-like creatures, but they're all wielding small axes and they're just running at you.
That would terrify
that actually really creeps me out. But yeah, that was the orang pendek. What do you think?
Oh man, that's quite compelling, that one.
Yeah, do you think it's likely to actually exist? I mean, the part that stands out for me, and I said it earlier, was the expert saying that, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a primate in this area that hasn't been identified and exists.
Yeah,
that seems bizarre to me. Like, surely, on land at least, most species of that size.
Also, this isn't like this. In a lot of these cases, I'm like, it's in some obscure kind of or like some small island, and I'm just thinking,
Right.
why haven't we just scoured it? Like if it was there, we would have found it. Like Loch Ness Monster, to be honest. Like, the Loch Ness is quite big, but it's not big enough that I'm like, how have we just not discovered it if it's there?
Yeah.
Whereas,
but if ideally you want this natural habitat to be preserved and free from human interference, so it's kind of it's the inevitable result of hopefully people leaving nature alone. Is that you'll have these creatures that just aren't ever properly discovered until the chance occasion where a dead one turns up in the pathway in front of a scientist who's like, oh, I shall take this specimen home.
True. But what I'm saying is that this is not one of those scenarios, because I didn't realize this, but Sumatra is the 6th largest island in the world, apparently. So this is... Is
it?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, okay.
So this is...
I don't know anything about Sumatra except the name.
Wow.
Me
really.
neither.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. I'm sure there's plenty of... This seems like a scenario where there could be undiscovered creatures like this living there that maybe we just haven't discovered yet. It seems quite possible to me.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
I mean, Indonesia is huge as well.
Yeah.
Vast, isn't it, in terms of the population?
So yeah, that was my one. But I think that covers all the ones that we'd like to speak about tonight.
I think arguably more so even than the frog. I want this one to exist. The orang pendek. It sounds awesome and terrifying if it's an axe-wielding ghost. That is not good.
Yeah, sure.
But if it's the other thing, then I'm like, it's a cute little thing. I want it to exist.
Could be cool. Yeah. That's what you think until you feed it after midnight and it turns into something else. Yeah,
I'm that guy in the horror movies who's like, oh, come on, little fella. And I reach out a hand and it bites my hand off and then they all gang up on me and beat me to death with their clubs.
By horror movie, you're talking about Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the kind of societal implications of discovering a human-like kind of creature undiscovered? That's kind of an actual like uses tools, and I mean, a lot of the great apes do use tools, but like maybe that one that has their own societies and tents and
that's not
quite
as
discovered fire. Maybe I don't know. Like what's?
I think there'd be a definite split, wouldn't there? There'd be those that see it as a threat, and then those that are like, let them be, let them do what they want to do.
Let them evolve. Let them.
Ultimately, we'd find some excuse to get into conflict with them.
Yeah. So there'd be your Prime Directive people from Star Trek who are saying, let's protect them, leave them be, don't interfere. And then your mad general who's like, bomb the hell out of them before they turn on us. And then you'd get your far-right Christians who are just like, evolution isn't a thing. This proves nothing. God put them there to test us. We should eradicate them with fire. Because they all sound like that, obviously.
They do, yes.
No, interesting.
Or it might be a Twitter storm for about 5 minutes and then go away.
I mean, I'm saying that like if that did happen, I think it would be like the 5th most crazy thing that's happened in the last decade, probably. But yeah, let us know what you thought of these cryptids in the comments down below or on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Feel free to review us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on as well. I think if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review, like an actual handwritten review, and we do very much enjoy
handwritten.
Handwritten, and
you have to send it by post.
But we very much enjoy reading those as well. Thank you again to all of our Patreon supporters, and make sure if you are listening to this to subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can catch us going live for the quiz, the live quiz episodes. But before we go, I do have to ask you guys, did you get the answer to the riddle?
Oh, goodness. Can you read it one more time?
Yeah. I'll read it one more time.
Yeah.
It cannot be seen, it cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt, lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. Comes first, follows after, ends life, kills laughter.
My mojo.
It is. It's Robin's mojo.
It's
well
Robin's.
Done. That was the podcast. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
I think a lot of those are wordplay, aren't they? Like comes under hills, and after whatever. It's going to be like where this word
I think I have an idea.
What
But,
is added
Martin,
to?
do you want
No,
to
no,
guess
you go
first?
for it. You go for it. My
sure?
brain's too scrambled.
Well, based mostly on the behind stars thing, is it darkness?
Robin, you would be absolutely spot on. It is darkness. Well done.
Ah,
Yeah.
yes.
Very good.
There are
Yes.
some. I feel like with the rhyming ones, there's often like red herrings, like ends life. Does it?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it does.
Yeah, that was a bit
Darkness
kind of
at
like
the end
it's
of-
the last thing you see, presumably,
Yeah.
is darkness. But that seems a bit.
What were some
not
of
the
the other
darkness
bits?
itself that's doing
Kills
it.
laughter.
Kills
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah, that must be metaphorical. Like you're having a
yeah.
great time, and then someone says something really dark. But that was the bit that threw
Yeah.
me, as I said at the beginning of this episode. Those last couple of lines, I was like, that doesn't make sense with darkness, but it kind of does if you think about it.
Yeah.
I'm defending this
Tangentially.
because I got it right. Obviously,
It
there's
was
no other
great.
reason.
Otherwise, I
Best
hate it.
fiddle ever. Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you everyone for watching and listening. We hope you enjoyed this, and if you did enjoy this episode, maybe, who knows, maybe we can do a part 2 follow-up in the near future. Thank you everyone so much for listening and tuning in, and we shall see you next time.
Bye for
Bye.
now.